Everybody doing okay today? Sounds like everybody's having a good time visiting, and that's great. I want to say right out of the gate, on behalf of Nixa Hardware, we want to say thank you for participating in this class. I hope it's been a worthwhile investment, and certainly hope that it helps you in your adventures with beekeeping. If you're like me, the more you get into it, the more passionate you'll become about it, and you'll really enjoy the journey. So I hope the information that you've gotten over the last 3 weeks will be beneficial to you and help you. If I can stress anything to you, my biggest stress to you would be when you get to your bees, stay calm and relax. I was talking with this young lady here today. You know, when you get into those bees, if you're anxious and nervous, which is normal for us as a new beekeeper, they will sense that and they'll pick up on that pheromone that you exhibit or that you expend from that. And they, in turn, will become like that as well and become a little more aggressive. So the more you can relax, be deliberate in your actions, think through what you're going to do, and then go into it like you know exactly what you're doing. That will help you feel more confident and be more relaxed in doing it, and you'll get along so much better. The more you work with your bees, the more they will recognize you and the more relaxed they will become with you, unless you just happen to have a queen that's testy and doesn't like to be bothered or doesn't like for her bees to be bothered. So my hope and prayer is that you really enjoy this journey and that you have a lot of fun with it. Okay? How many have gotten their nukes so far? How did you get along installing your nukes?
Scared to death.
Not too good, huh?
No, remarkably calm. I was really surprised at just how easy it really was, and they were. We got them that morning. Probably 4 or 5 hours later, we actually opened them up, put them in, and we had no trouble whatsoever.
Very calm.
The Nuke was pretty well developed. I was surprised at how much they had really worked it, and we put the slats in, and then there's still quite a few bees in the box, the Nuke box itself. We just left it there, and about 2 or 3 hours later, they were all in the hive.
Good.
So,
how many frames of brood did you recognize? How many frames of brood you had?
All 5. All 5.
Oh, wow. So they were ready to expand.
Yeah, in fact, we're interested to see what it looks like after a week.
Yeah.
But yeah, all 5 were. In fact, there was even some, they'd even got up on the top of the inside of the box and the side and stuff, so there was quite a bit of additional work that had been done in there.
Yep. Yeah, and that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for on the top of the lid. You'll see a lot of wax buildup. Especially, you've got to remember that most of those nukes have been there since fall, so they're really, when they start in February, they're going to build out in a hurry. And if they come out of the south where the nectar flow starts earlier, they've got a leg up on us here. So they've already been working for a couple of 3 months. So there's a lot of activity that's been going on in that nuke box. So don't be surprised if you don't see wax build up all over that box, especially on the top, because their nature is to go up. How did you get along with yours, brother?
Kind of no.
Huh?
I
Yeah.
dropped the bottom board, so mine came in a kit. So
Yep.
I got the bottom of the hive, and as I was carrying it over, I dropped the bottom board off. So we were really concerned.
Yep.
I set it down, and then I looked around, and there's the bottom board sitting there. And so all the bees were exposed underneath, and I didn't have the rest of my equipment. So I didn't have. They had forgotten to bring the protective gear along when they gave me the bottom of the hive. So I didn't have any protective equipment, and that really riled them up because I dropped the board, just being young and and a new beekeeper. So I just kind of walked away from the hive for that day, and then Dan was nice enough to lend me some equipment so I could go back that evening and get them on the bottom board and put the bottom board on the stand like I was trying to do. I haven't been in there yet, but hopefully they're okay. They had settled down quite a bit, and they looked like they were doing pretty well that evening. So.
Yeah. So how many got to hear his story? Let me share that with you. What was your first name, brother? I forgot. Adam, yeah. So Adam called one day this week. his bees came in the form of a hive box. Some people do that. They'll sell you the complete hive. What he didn't recognize, and it's an easy mistake to make, I've made it myself, was that when they take them out of the nuke and put them into this hive, the bees have not had enough time to seal the brood box to the bottom board. So when he picked them up by the sides of the box like this, and in transport, the bottom board fell off, which is a common, normal mistake. So what I wanted, and he done the right things. When the bottom board fell off, he set the brood box down and walked away, because it does excite them and stir them a little bit. There's really no harm done to the bees, because they're not going to leave this box. The queen has got her brood there, she's there. They're not going to just fly off because of that. But he did the right thing by just setting them down and walking away until he could get the proper attire to address the situation. So what I would tell you, as I told Adam, anytime if you get a complete hive like that, or anytime you're moving a complete hive, make sure that you strap down and you tie it off really good to the bottom board, because in transport, those, even if they've been there a while and they have time to propolis this together, they're still, if it's bumped or accidentally hit, that bottom board can come off, and it will just eliminate that step of a headache. So I take a tie strap with ratchets and I hook it under my bottom boards, and then I strap it down and I tighten it up. Anytime I'm transporting hives, that's just a given. So just plan on that. Fortunately for Adam, it was a minor situation that didn't create a lot of problems for the internal hive, and everything worked out fine once he got his equipment. But if you drop a hive or anything like that in transport without it being ratcheted together, it could be catastrophic. Okay, so just make sure that you strap them down good, ratchet them up to where it's tight and it's going to stay in place, and then you can transport and take them anywhere you want to. Okay, anybody else get bees this week? How many have got bees coming next weekend, 7th and 8th? Okay, great. They'll be here Friday. I think the hardware is saying if you'll come at noon, that gives them time to offload the trailer and get them staged, and it'll make everything a lot easier. So by noon, you should be able to go to the hardware and pick them up. And everybody got their laundry net? Okay. Laundry.
Statement on that.
Yes.
I shopped all the dollar stores. They don't have laundry nets. The hardware now has mesh bags. I got a mesh bag at Walmart, but once I saw the hardware one, the mesh at the hardware is much smaller.
Yep.
So I recommend.
Yeah, you got to be careful. Watch your net mesh size. That's critical. Okay. But if you're transporting them within your vehicle, it's recommended, and I certainly would encourage you getting a laundry net so you can have a safe journey home. Okay, today we're going to do some review on installation of nukes, as well as I want to walk with you through this a little bit about how to examine your hive and what to look for and what to do. And then we're going to open up the rest of the session for questions and answers. So it'll be your time to do whatever you want. How high do I need my hive off of the ground? What's the measurements? About 16 to 18 inches. As you can see, I'm a little higher than this because I started to go get the 4 concrete blocks, and I thought, yikes. So I just borrowed their tank and set it up here. But as you can see, I'm already at a level where I'm comfortable working, looking down over into my hive. Time I get another brood box on, I'm going to be stretching it, and if I get a super on, I'm going to be challenged. So 16 to 18 inches is a real comfortable place to be. It does good for the hive itself as far as pests and predators, but for you as an individual, when you get too high, it becomes really challenging on your back and gives you a little more limitation as far as what you can look at when you get into the hive. If you can see this, and you may not be able to, but I have got wedges on the back side of my hive here because I have leveled this, and I do have a shorter level, but I didn't have it with me. These lids have a little bit of a rounded top for water shed, so it's really a little challenging to get a good level on that. So I took it off, and I leveled it, and I'm straight across. I am perfect on balance. But when I go this way, I'm still within the marks of my bubble, but I'm leaning this way. So, and that's what I want. I want when water hits the landing board that it sheds away and not back into the hive. Any questions? That's really critical to keep the moisture out of your hive, because the bees will really not appreciate that, and probably if it gets too much moisture, like some of the rains we've been having, they're going to abscond. Especially in the summertime when it's really hot and humid and that moisture turns into mold in a hurry, it'll cause you all kinds of problems and you'll lose your bees. Any questions about staging? Good.
Oh, I do have one.
Okay.
Which direction should you orient the opening?
So you want the face, this is called the face of the hive, you want it facing east to southeast. You want that morning sun on the face of this hive as early as you can. That gets them out of their working. They'll not come in until right at dark anyway, regardless, but that gets them out of the hive a lot quicker and gets more production out of that hive for you. It also protects the face of that hive from the north and the northwest wind, which is where our most treacherous winds come from normally. Okay, especially in the wintertime. Okay, you'll notice that I've still got my front cover on, or my entrance reducer, thank you, on. This time of year, if it were my hive, they would be off. That's my opinion. If I have a problem with pests, if I see I have a problem with wasp or hornets or something like that, I might leave it on. But if my bees are working good and I don't see any issues going on around them, my entrance reducer comes off this time of year. This is, by the way, is a perfect morning to work bees. We should have had this class tomorrow. 81, sunny, calm wind, ideal conditions to work bees. Now, it was like 51 early this morning. I would have waited till it got up to about 60 to 65 before I'd have cracked the top on my hive, but this is really a good morning. Okay, let's talk about installing our nukes. So I have picked up my nuke from Nixa Hardware or wherever, and I take it home and I set it down either beside my hive like this, or I may just set it on top of my hive like this. My front entrance is open. If the hardware closes it for you for transportation, that's best and wise, and that's what they should do. But when you get home, you'll want to open that front. And it's pretty simple. It just lifts out. You'll take your hive tool and you'll just pry it out. Have your jacket on because they'll roll out of there. And then crack it up and lift it like that. It sets down in that little groove. That gives them the ability to fly in and out. And believe me, if it's a full hive, they will roll out of there. So you'll want to be, unless you're brave and courageous, you'll want to be dressed for the occasion. So I would let them set like this for at least, you could go in that evening if you pick them up at noon to Friday or Saturday, or you can pick them up, put them in the next morning. I want to let them set for a little while to settle down from transporting them, because they don't like a lot of movement like that, and especially jocked around and moved around. So I need to give them time to calm down, either that evening, depending on the weather conditions. If they're calling for rain the next day, then that evening I'm probably going to move to put them in the hive. Any questions?
What if it's raining when we get them? Is it still okay to just set them on top?
Set them on top and open the front. Yep. They'll be fine. I mean, if it's raining, that's fine. They're protected, so you won't get any water. I would not open like this, but I would just open the front end, and if they want out to fly, that's fine. They won't fly much.
Should you put something on top to hold it in place?
Wouldn't hurt to weight it. Sure wouldn't. You should have a weight for your hive here. I'd just set it on top of it, as long as it's not real heavy. A brick, something like that, anything to keep the wind from catching it and flipping it up like that. Anybody else? Great. So I'm getting ready to install my nuke. So when I get ready, I'm dressed. I'm going to set the nuke down beside my hive box. I'm going to get my sugar water. There it is. It's just water, by the way. But it should be sugar water with hopefully honeybee healthy in it. And then I'm ready to proceed. The first step I'm going to take is I'm going to take a big deep breath and relax. Normally, these nukes are pretty docile. Once in a while, and I'm going to say every one of them, but once in a while you'll get one that's really testy. You'll be able to tell when you pick this nuke up what the level of bees is in it. If it's pretty heavy and saucy, you know you've got a hive full of bees. If it's light, it may be just a young hive that's got some growth ahead of it. But you'll be able to kind of get a feel for the contents of what's in that nuke box. So I'm going to get ready. I'm going to take off my top board and I'm going to take off my inner cover. In this case, I'm going to pull out the 5 middle frames of my hive brood box, just like that. And I'll set them down out of the way because I'm not going to need them in this case. I want to make sure that every one of these are misted down with sugar water because I want them to take to it. So I take the time to mist every one of them down really nice, not real, you don't want to soggy, but just make sure you get a good overspray on them just like that. And set them in and do the last 2 as well. Now my hive brood box is ready to receive my nuke box. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mist down the front of my hive box just because I want my bees to know that this is home. I'm also, you've got guard bees on the front of this nuke. I'm going to give it a shot or 2 just to kind of calm them down. This lid may be propolis down, and it may not just come up like that. Remember, they don't like sudden movements. They don't like bumping action. They don't like jolting. So I've got to come up really easy with this lid the best that I can. And if it's propolis down, I may have to take my hive tool and break it loose, gently break it loose. Once I do that, then I'm ready to proceed. So I'll ease my lid up, and as I do, I'm misting down my frames like this. I'll have bees up on the top there, so I'm misting them down really good, because ideally what I want to do is I want to kind of push those bees back down in the box, and the sugar water misting them will have that effect. Once you notice I'm kind of backwards here. My lid's kind of right in the way. So if you're working by yourself, I would put this box on the other side to where it's out of my way. If you have somebody helping you, then they can kind of manage the lid for you. But ideally, if I'd have been smart, I would have started on this side like this. Okay? So I can work from this point to this point. Get everything out of my way so I don't step on it or stumble or fall or have any issues like that. I've misted down my fronts. I've misted down my frames. I've misted down my top. Now I'm ready to transfer from this box into my brood box. Everybody with me? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
One of my hives is frameless, so for the bees that built their own. So do I just spray the whole inside of the box?
You can.
Okay.
So tell me why you're going frameless, just out of curiosity.
That's just how one of them came. My husband just thought that I would enjoy it. And so and it has like the frame builder on it. Like you can't take the frame builder out. So I just thought.
So does it have little strips of wax?
Yeah.
Okay, so as long as you've got the frame builder, you'll be fine. If you had nothing in this box, it would be such a maze of a mess, you'd never be able to work those bees.
Okay.
But as long as you got frame and you've got some direction for them, they'll take that. So what she has is basically a frame with just a 1 inch, maybe a 1.5 inch strip up above. And what the bees will do is they'll bring it on down or know that they have a lot longer to work. It'll take them longer to get where she wants them to go. But a lot of people do that. That way everything in here is all natural. They've created it, they've done it. But a lot of organic beekeepers will do that because they want the all-natural effect on that frame. But she's given them some guideline directions. If she didn't have any framework at all, they would be everywhere. I mean, you would not ever find that queen, and you would never be able to do anything with that hive. It would be a complete conglomeration of a mess. And I've seen it happen, and it's no picnic at all. Any other questions? Yes?
So when you're transferring the frames, do you want to just swap them as fast as you can, or maybe inspect them first?
I like to inspect them. If my hive is calm and I can work with them and they don't mind me being there, I like to inspect them as I go. If they're pretty testy and they're feisty, it tells me I might need to move a little quicker, just out of consideration for myself more than them. But yeah, if they're calm, I don't want to work them. I want to see what's going on. And I would love to see the queen if I can. And that again depends on the age of the queen. If she's young, she'll be flighty and darty, and you'll have a hard time seeing her. If she's an older queen, she won't care if you're there or not, and she might be easier to pick up. Okay? Now, when you get ready to transfer, I've already sprayed down my top. I've misted them, and it's okay to mist them a couple of times if you feel like you need to. You use your own judgment there. But these frames are going to be propolis down to this brood box. Remember, everything they do, they propolis. They don't want nothing moving. So it's going to be a little challenging. It's not going to be like you can just pick them up like this. You're going to have to take your hive tool and work your ends and break them. Break the sides of the frame, if you can see that. See if I can get this where I can do this. So you'll have to pop your frames apart like this, and then possibly like this on each end before you can pull that frame out. Once I pull that frame out, I've got a hold of the ends like this. I'm good to look if they're not mad. And I want to examine it. I can flip it over and I can examine this. What am I looking for? I want to see what the brood level looks like, how much work she's done. I've started with an outside frame. If she's got brood on that outside frame and all the way through, they're ready to expand and grow. They've been in there at that nuke long enough there. So if I've got brood on all 5 frames, I'm going to look for what? Queen cell. I want to make sure that they've not already signaled that they need to grow and swarm because they're running out of room. So I look it over. I also will take the time to mist them down. And I mist them down before I'm looking them over. That keeps them calm. And it doesn't hurt them at all. I can flip the frame. As long as I hold on to it, it's okay to flip it. If I've got the sun at my back, it's ideal. Or if I need to turn where the sun's reflecting on them, it helps me to see better. I want to see what the brood pattern looks like. I want to see how much propolis they've got up here and nectar they've got up here and what that all looks like. I just want to see how the welfare of the hive looks. And obviously I'm going to see if I can see her. Okay? Any questions? Once I've taken this out and I'm satisfied, I gently will set them down in there and then scoot it over toward my other frame. And then I repeat the process on the next frame and every frame thereafter. Pull it out, mist them down. I'm giving them honey bee healthy, so I'm doing them a huge favor in my opinion. And then I take my time to look. And I inspect every hive, every frame. Questions?
When you add the honey bee healthy to your water bottle and your sugar water,
Mm-hmm.
does that have a shelf life at all once it's mixed?
Your sugar water will have a shelf life. Yeah, I usually if I have excess when I make it up, I put it in the refrigerator. I usually don't put my Honey Bee Healthy in it until I'm ready to put it in my bottle. Mm-hmm. But the sugar water will have a shelf life, and you have to watch that. If you start seeing gray lines form through it, like a charcoal shade, then it's turning bad on you. getting rancid, and it's not good. They won't appreciate that at all. Yes.
How long would it usually last? You said the shelf life.
I usually a week to 10 days in the refrigerator.
And that's with the Honeybee Healthy in it.
I usually don't put the Honeybee Healthy in it until I put it in my bottle.
What if you're misting your stuff and you don't use it all up and then you stick it in the fridge?
You can stick it in the fridge.
That way?
It'll be fine. Yeah, it'll have a week to 10 days to use.
But let it room temperature before you use it.
It's ideal, yes.
How much sugar water do you usually use in a hive inspection? Like I know you said you do a cup of sugar, a cup of water. Do you
Yep.
usually use that full serving in one inspection or like?
If they're a good calm hive, no. If they're testy and I'm really fighting with them, I'll use more. But this bottle half full for a nuke transfer should be plenty. If I'm going to tear a hive apart, then I probably want to make sure my bottle's full. Okay? Any other questions?
We used half a bottle. We
Yeah.
transferred the nuke. And the other thing to keep in mind when that bottle gets about halfway done, if you're trying to like spray down in it, it's not going to spray very well. So just keep that in mind. But if you're
Yeah.
picking up all your slabs and spraying straight, it's
Did
fine.
you use smoke at all or you just went straight?
Oh, we didn't use any smoke.
They use sugar water.
That's what I'm
Just sugar
planning
water
on.
only, yeah.
Okay.
So the other thing to think about is if you have extra sugar water left over, we really want to put a feeder on the front of this hive when we're done. You can put it in your feeder jar. Okay? So I like to, when I install a nuke, any questions about transferring before I step away from it? So all 5 frames I've looked at, I've misted, I've sprayed, I've inspected. I put them in my hive box in the order that I take them out of my nuke box. That's critical that you do that. Okay? And once I've done that, then I have got my hive installed.
When you say you put them in the order that they come out, is that also front to back too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. I don't want to change anything that they've started. Yes, sir.
Back to the spraying. What if you can you just put down pure honey on there?
I would not.
No.
You can't work with pure honey. It's too thick. Number one, you can never get it. You can brush it on, but brushing them will make them aggravated.
Before you get them in there.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about putting on your frames?
Yeah.
You could. I don't know that there'd be an advantage to that, but you could. Yeah. But brushing them will really agitate them. So I used to think I had to have a brush. I've not used a brush in 6 or 7 years. Just because I've realized how much it makes them aggravated. So once I've walked through that step, I will take the extra step to mist this down and just give them a good drink of sugar water, and then I'm ready to close my hive up. Got my screen top, which is what I prefer. You're welcome to use whatever you want. My grandfather used paneling without a hole. How he got along with that, I'll never know, but he did. And then once I've done this, I'm done with my hive box. Now, I'm probably going to still have bees in here, so I'll take and set this box like this. I may need to prop this open with a stick to hold it up, but by nightfall, the bees will all be in the box. These folks that done theirs, they said 3 or 4 hours later, they were all in. And that's pretty simple as far as nuke installation. It's really easy, much easier. Anybody getting packaged bees? Smart. Good deal. Packaged bees are a lot harder to work with because there's a shaking process and you really agitate them, and it's a totally different ball game. And actually, when you get a packaged bee, the queen is still in the queen cage, so you have the responsibility of attaching her and releasing her at a later date. So it's a little more difficult. You save money on your investment initially, but boy, the transition is really a challenging opportunity, especially for a new beekeeper.
After we put the nukes in, how long should we feed them that sugar water? A week or two?
I would give them at least a couple of weeks. I want honeybee healthy in them for a couple of weeks if I can. Got two different options here, whichever one you want to use. And honestly, this should sit in there like this.
Do you do that before you do the nuke?
Yeah, I'll put the sugar water in there. I'll have my feeder staged before I put the nuke in. And I'm ready to go.
So Dan, you mentioned a couple weeks ago that the one thing the bees do really poorly is swim.
Yeah.
And we learned that. So we've got a different type of box, and it's got a feeder on top, which is like a tray. And you got to insert, you got to put it in the right way depending on whether you're feeding them candy or if you're feeding them the sugar water. We put it wrong, and we probably killed 200 bees because they drowned in it.
Is that a black insert?
Now it's actually a whole tray that goes on the top, and it's you literally pour your sugar water in there. But we had the insert open, and they were able to actually
Get to it.
Weeping through, they got in there and they drowned.
Yeah. Yeah, bees do not do well with that. They have to have some level of, like if you're staging water or anything like that close to the hive, I would fill it full of rocks and make sure that there's rocks protruding above the water level where they can land, and they can, because if you depend on them to walk on the side of your bowl or whatever, you're going to lose them. They just don't do well with that.
What's your position on frame feeders?
I'm not a fan of frame feeders because I've seen too many bees die from them. They used to be really popular, but I've seen a lot of losses. They're supposed to have a wire to protect that, but that wire doesn't always stay in place, so it causes a lot of casualty with the bees because they get right in it, and once they're in it, it's over. Yes, sir.
Did you say last week that you go ahead and install Aftermarket Strips when you transfer a new nuke in?
I do. Usually I will put my Aftermarket Strips in, especially with a swarm, but I like to with a nuke as well. That way I know that I have done the first application. And just for sake of knowing where to put them, let's pretend this is an Aftermarket Strip. It'll be about this wide, and I usually take them right to the middle 2 to 4 frames and stick them in the middle of the hive. Insert them down. They'll have a hole in the top of the Aftermarket Strip. I take a toothpick and just run that through that hole and let the toothpick rest on top of the frames. That kind of holds it in place, keeps it from falling on down through the frames. But I usually, within the first 4 frames in the middle, is where I'll distribute my 2 strips on a single brood box. Okay?
But for a nuke, it's just one. For the nuke, it's just one.
No, I want to use 2. I would use 2.
2 on the 5 strips, okay.
Yeah. Because I'm using 10 frames. Especially if my nuke is wildly full, I want the 2. And the 2 won't hurt them.
Now, the Aftermarket, that's the most gentlest of the not highly chemical.
It's kind of an all-natural. The Hop Guard is an all-natural. The Apple-Guard is an all-natural as well. The Apple-Guard is a little can about that deep, and it sets right on top of the frames. You can use that. I've seen a lot of people use that. You can use that if you want. I don't want you to think that I'm just pushing Apivar, but Hop Guard, any of those will work fine for you.
Okay, once you've opened your package, so there's 10 strips in there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you Ziploc the rest?
It'd be good if you could. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So you've got your nukes all in there, and you've sprayed it all down with sugar water. You put the Aftermarket in the very last thing before you put the lid on.
Yep. Yep. Anybody else?
I have another question on the Aftermarket.
Okay.
At the end of the first year, if they've done enough production, we've added a second brood box, we've even added a super. But at the end of that first year, if we're not robbing any honey from them, we leave all 3 of those on, including the super. And if we do we still use Aftermarket Strips? Because I know that you don't use Aftermarket Strips when you have a super installed.
I do. If I'm leaving my super on and I'm going into the fall of the year, I leave my super on and I put my Aftermarket Strips in. The reason that is because the honey that is sealed, if they don't break it, it's not, the apivar is not going to hurt it. If they're going to feed off of that super, then they're going to pull that honey out. Then they'll refill it when after I've taken my apivar strips out, because there's no nectar flow through the winter months. So in my thinking process, I think I'm safe. And I've never had any problem with honey from that as well.
So then in the spring, if they've not used all of the stores, do you look over the frames and any that they've broken open to use, do you remove those from the honey suit?
I let them fill it up. I let them go in and fill it up before I pull it off.
Okay.
So it's a twofold purpose. Number one, I've fed them, I've gave them food stores for the winter months. When spring gets here and I inspect my hive and there's still 4 or 5 frames that are empty, I leave it on and take my apivar strips out, obviously, leave it on and let them fill it out before I rob it.
Okay, but if they tapped into any of those honey stores, it wouldn't be contaminated the fact that the apivar strips were in there when they broke it open?
Once they break the seal or they start feeding on it, they'll pull the honey out of that cell.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question as to why you would leave a super on during the winter.
So if I'm not comfortable with the honey stores that are in my brood boxes, or if I've got a super that's got 3 frames that's all that's filled out and I don't need the honey, I want to me it's an insurance policy for the bees going through the winter, that they've got plenty of food source to get through the winter.
Okay, so it wouldn't make it too cold then?
No. No, it will create more room to heat. I see what you're saying, but honey acts like a blanket, like a thermal blanket. It actually holds heat, and it acts like a thermal blanket for the hive. So I don't think it's going to hurt them at all. And I've got the insurance that there's honey stores available to them should they run out of the honey down in the bottom boxes. Yes, sir.
Now, you say you put your apivar strips in after you put your nuke or your frames in. Now, do you leave your apivar strips in there year round?
40 days, 43 days.
Then take them out?
Yep.
Then when you put them back in the fall?
Though those strips are done. So you throw them away, and then, yes, I put new strips in the fall. Okay?
Does it matter what box, to put the apivar strips?
You're only going to have one box to start out.
Like, say it's the fall.
So if you've got 2 boxes on, you'll want them in both boxes.
Okay.
2 strips per box.
Awesome.
Okay? Anybody else?
Yeah, one quick question on the setup. I don't recall us talking about it, but do you fasten your boxes down to your stand, whatever, or how do you keep those things in high wind from blowing over?
Once they're filled, they're going to weigh 90 pounds apiece, 95. They're not very apt to blow over unless it's just a atrocious straight line wind. I do weight them with like a half of a concrete block or something like that. If you are more comfortable strapping them down, you can do that. The only problem with that is every time you go to work them, you got to unstrap them, which is not a problem either, but I've never had one to blow off a hive stand as a result of wind.
I was raising bees in South Louisiana. I've been through 5 hurricanes, one which came straight over the house. I've never lost a lid, and I don't even put anything on the lid. I use that lid right there, too.
Yeah, I have seen lids blow off. Now, did you have inner covers on those hives?
Yeah.
So they didn't propolis this lid down with an inner cover on there. It just, you think the weight of it just held it down.
I love that lid.
Yeah, it's a good lid.
I mean, in South Louisiana, wood rots, I got that one, and I still got it.
Lasts forever. I have seen lids blow off. I just better be safe than sorry. I'd put a weight on top of it. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Talking about the lid, they have the plastic base that kind of matches the lid.
Mhm.
Do you like the plastic bases?
Never have used one.
Okay.
I don't see anything wrong with them. I never have used one.
I've got one.
You'll probably
all this stuff. I don't.
Well, the longevity of it will be so much more than wood, And that's the challenge with wood. You have to keep your wood treated or painted because it will rot out on you. If you don't treat or paint that wood periodically, and I'm talking every couple, 3 years, it will rot and decay or deteriorate on you. Where this plastic like this, it's there forever. It's a lifetime thing.
So here's my question about that then. Do you just transfer them, your bees, like you do, like a nuke transfer basically into a new treated box while you retreat the old box?
You can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you need to paint those every year, or are they pretty
Not
much?
not every year, but every probably 3 years or so. I'd probably freshen them up. Yes, sir?
Mine has, I'm not sure what it's made out of, but it has a cover on top of the lid itself. It's wrapped. It looks like some kind of heavy flashing material with no seals.
Oh,
Like
probably.
it's waterproof and reflective to the sun.
Is it do this number?
No.
Just like this?
Is it like the one over there?
Like that? So the wood on the rims, you'll have to keep painted outside.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it, I think it may go all the way around.
So if it wraps all the way around, you're fine. No paint. You don't want to paint anything on the inside of the hive. Only exterior. But if it wraps and covers the sides as well, no need for paint. You'll be fine.
And if it's like that, paint it before you get the
Paint this part right here. Yeah.
regular exterior paint.
Yeah, latex exterior. Prime it first because this is a pine. It'll soak it up. You can even paint this bottom strip, the bottom of that strip, but nothing on the inside. Okay.
What happens if you do paint it on the inside?
Bees won't like it. The smell. You could possibly lose them to absconding because of the smell of the paint.
Well, the first hives I did paint the inside of it because nobody'd ever told me that. And I'm still using them today and I don't seem to have any problems.
No problems with them.
Inside that lid, no.
Typically, they'll tell you not to paint the inside. You're pretty lucky.
Well, see, nobody had told me that
Yeah.
when I first started. But
Yeah.
that's the only inside that I'd ever painted was the lid.
Oh, on the lid?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The hive, if you painted the inside of the box, it might be a little more
It
challenging.
was just the lid I painted the inside
Okay.
of it.
Yeah. You'll be all right. Any other questions? Okay, let's talk about inspecting our hive. So once you get your nukes installed into your hive box, you got your front feeder on, I'd let them settle down for 4 or 5 days, maybe a week, before you go in and examine that hive. The first thing that I always do, and you can do that with your existing hive, is I really kind of step back and I watch the front of what's going on. I want to see traffic in and out of there on a steady basis. The more traffic I see, the happier I am. If I see just 1 or 2 bees milling around and just hanging out here, or I see a bunch of bees just hanging out on the front and nobody taking flight, it gives me cause to think there might be a challenge. And what would that challenge be? Yeah. So if my queen, if something has happened to my queen, those bees will come real listless, aimless, like they have no sense of direction, and what you'll see them doing is just milling around, not working like they should be working. So that's why it's important that I examine, or I just pay attention to what's going on to the front of that hive. I can get some indication about the health of my hive by just watching and observing how my bees are doing. Any questions there?
So it's normal then also just to see them flying around the front of the hive too? Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes you'll even see them flurry. You'll just have a bunch of bees just flying and flurrying around the top of the hive, and you wonder, what in the world is going on? That sometimes can be a predator bee, another hive, trying to move in on this hive, or it could be just your hive just having a flurry of activity for whatever reason. I've never seen or understood why they do that, nor have I scientifically read any explanation of that. But once in a while, you'll see that happen.
So far this week, I see them flying around on the outside a bit, coming and going. And then when I was out cutting grass, we noticed in our lilacs and in one of our other fruit trees out there, there was just lots and lots of bees in those trees and in those lilacs.
Working the nectar flow.
So I'm assuming pretty healthy activity.
You're good. Yeah. Yep, that's good. This gentleman brought in a bush there. We looked it up. It's an Amur maple. The bees literally cover that bush up. Amur, A-M-U-R, maple. Has a white bloom. Birds love it. The bees love it. So anything like that that will give you food source for your hive, yeah, go for it.
Is it a wild one or is it a purchased one?
I don't think it was wild.
You can buy them, I think. You can go online and find them probably. Okay, any questions? Okay, I'm ready to break into my hive, and it's weeks past since I've installed my nuke. I've stood back and I've kind of watched the traffic flow. I've got my sugar water and honeybee healthy ready. So I'm going to mist down the front of my hive. I'm going to give it just a good drink because I've got guard bees there and I don't want to send any alarms if I can help it. And then at that point, I'm ready to break into my hive. I want to work my hive from behind or at best from the side, ideally from behind. If you're in a position with your hive stage that you need to work from the side, that's fine. I would stay out of the front of the hive. We did hive inspections with a bee club one year where we take all the bee club members out and we actually open up a live hive and we inspect it so they could learn. They were new beekeepers, and I'd have 2 or 3 of them want to stand right in the front and watch. Then they'd stand right here and I'm like, you really don't want to stand right there. So we don't want to get out in the front. Number one, you're already alerting your guard bees, and number 2, you're interfering with the traffic flow of the worker bees. So let's work it from the back side if we can at all, or at best from the side. So this lid may get propolis down. Again, they like everything to stay in place. You may have to break it loose with your hive tool. I don't want to pound on it. I don't want to beat on it or bang it to try to break it loose. I want to be gentle and see if I can break it loose with my hive tool and then take it off. Normally, what I like to do, especially if I'm 2 boxes deep, I'll take this lid and I'll flip it over beside my brood box. And in this case, I don't have enough room to do that, so I would put it on the ground. Because when I take my top box off, I'm going to set it cattywampus on my lid to keep from smashing any more bees than necessary. So it'll give you an idea of what cattywampus looks like, kind of like sideways like this. That way, you're going to have a few fatalities. That's just part of the process, and you need to accept that. But I've minimized it with just certain points. If I put it down like this, my casualties are going to be a lot higher, right? So I just set it cattywampus like that. That way, it's still getting airflow, and there's minimal casualties. And by the way, this super, I put my 9 frame pieces in so you can see what it does for you if you want to come up and look at it after a while. Okay, so now I'm at my inner cover here, and I've got my screen inner cover on so I can really get a good bird's eye view of what's going on. Once in a while you'll have 3 or 4 honeybees up in the top, on the top side of this screen. Nothing to worry about. I don't get alarmed, and they usually don't get aggressive. So they're actually trying to figure out how to get back down in the hive once they got to this place. But you may see over time a spider web, a little black spider. You may see a red wasp. You may see a number of things like that. If you get hive beetles, you may for sure see hive beetles in the top, especially if your hive is strong and won't let them come through the screen. So if I see hive beetles, that's when I just go to killing. And same with spiders. Spiders are not going to hurt anything, but I don't really want them there, so I take care of that business. Same with a red wasp. I'll just kind of pinch their head off with my hive tool, get them out of the problem, so they don't cause me a problem. So I'm able to see what my bee population looks like. I can get a good overview, and from that point, I'm ready to when I'm ready to take my screen cover off, I'll start misting sugar water through my screen. That way when I take that screen off, I don't have bees up in my face. Okay? So I've misted them down. I can guarantee you that this will be propolis down, so I go to my corners and I break the corners loose like this, each corner until I can take it off. And this will probably be covered with bees on the bottom side, so I want to be real gentle with it. I want to move slow, and I want to set it down in a way that it doesn't interfere with what they're doing. So my bees are on this side, they've got open face, and I'm not causing any problems. Now then, if I need to spray and mist more, I will. I want these bees to stay calm. Ideally, I'd kind of like to see them go back down in between the frames, and so I'll just mist them. I don't want to drown them, but if I can keep them busy feeding off each other with the sugar water, I can work better without less interference from them or less agitation from them. Any questions?
Quick question on the screen inner cover. What months do you leave that on?
I leave mine on year round.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't create too much airflow in the winter?
No, if I put my entrance reducer on in the winter, it slows that airflow down.
Okay.
What I have seen in the past in the winter is they build up so much heat in there that if I had a solid cover or one of the telescopic inner covers, that the heat would not be able to escape fast enough, and they would have mold creation because of they created so much heat. So I've gotten along a lot better with just leaving this on year round. That way my airflow is restricted by my entrance reducer, and yet the excess heat has the ability to escape. Okay? Any other questions? I don't want to disrupt the order of my frames. So what I do, and these frames are all going to be propolis down. I wish I could lift this where you could see it. Maybe I can. These work great, by the way. They last forever. Nix Hardware has them, and they're just used one at a time. But they work great for leveling your hive. Let's do this. Let's see if I can get creative here without losing my load. Can you see better? Okay, I've misted everything down, and which side you start from does not matter. It's totally up to you. I will usually start from, because I'm right-handed, the right side. So I've got to go in here and I've got to break these apart because they're propolis together. And that's not always an easy trick. So you have to be careful. You got bees all over the place. You don't want to really mash a bee, so you kind of got to work with them. Break it loose. If you can break it loose sideways, that typically breaks this corner up. But then I take and I pull it out with my hive tool and hold on to it. And the trick is right here, getting that up and getting your fingers on that before it goes back down. But once I get it on both ends, then I can lift it and I can examine it. If I want to spray it with, mist it down with sugar water, I can. It's totally up to you. Typically, these two outside frames will be more than likely empty. So if it's empty, then I just set it down over to the side like this and lean it up against my hive. A lot of times, so I have plenty of room to work, I will take the second one out, same way. I'll inspect it. If it's light or empty, then I will, after I've looked it over, I will set it down on the outside as well. Now I've got ample room to move my frames and work. Okay? And this is when the fun begins, because when you get to frame number 6 through 8, that's where most of your activity is, especially with a new hive. When you get into fall, they should be a lot fuller than that. But one at a time, I'll pull them out and I'll look them over. I'm looking for what? What am I looking for? Looking for brood, and I would like to see my queen. I don't get alarmed if I see my queen. Why would I not get alarmed? What am I looking for that tells me my queen's there?
Eggs.
Eggs? What else? Real light colored brood. Brood cells that are covered and really a light color, almost this color, that tells me that that's newly laid and freshly covered, so it's very young brood. The darker the brood, the older the brood. But I'm looking for this light colored brood. That tells me my queen's been working. That puts me at ease a little more, especially if I can't see her, if I don't find her. If she's faster than my eyes are, or she darts under the frame onto the other side before I can spot her. And believe me, when she gets into the mix of a bunch of bees, you have to look if she's not marked. She will not be easily recognized or spotted. So you have to really look close. Take your time. If your bees are docile, they don't care. Take your time and look all you want to until you're satisfied with what you're seeing. But always keep a firm grip on this frame. You don't want to drop it or you don't want to bump it, because they will then not be docile no more. Remember how you took this out and put it back in, and I usually move it over here to this side so I have room to work these others. So this way I can break this one loose. I can lay my tool down and I can pull them out like this. And I can flip it over like this and I can look at it. And if you've got a partner with you, if they want to spray, mist these down with sugar water, that's awesome. The more honeybee healthy you get into them, the better it is for the hive. Just take your time. There's another thing that I'm watching for while I'm doing this. What would that be? What was it? Queen cells. Yep. Especially if you bought a nuke that is full. I mean full. You want to pay attention. So I'm looking for brood. I'm looking for the brood pattern. Remember how we talked about the half moon? I'm looking for, that tells me a lot about my queen. If my brood pattern is real spotty all over that frame, that kind of gives me an indication that I may have a young queen. If I have a good solid brood pattern that's really full, that tells me I may have a more mature queen. I want to see propolis in this frame. So I want to really see, ideally, your brood pattern should make a half moon like this on your bottom. Not all of them will do that. They don't read the books like we do. She may just start here and run across ways this way. But I do want to see if there's propolis and honey stores in the corners or at the top, because that's what they feed the brood with. So I'm particularly looking at my brood pattern. I'd like to find my queen, and I want to make sure I don't have queen cells, and I pay attention to my drone population as well. Well, remember what I told you about the drone population? If my hive, and this is my opinion, this is not scientific fact, but this has been my experience. If my hive has an explosion of drone cells, and drone cells will draw out higher than what the regular brood cell will, it'll almost look like it's got a marshmallow cap on it, and normally they're at the bottom, so it'll look just like a brood cell, but extended out fuller, because the drone bee is a bigger bee than the worker bee. If I have an explosion of that drone population going on, what does that tell me? That they have indicated they may be in the mode of swarming already. The drone cells are important because they breed the virgin queen. So the next step to that leg may be my queen cells. So I got to pay attention to what's going on to this hive. So if I see an explosion of drones or drone cells, that means that I've really got to visit my hive a lot more often than what I might normally anticipate, because I got to pay attention to queen cells. Questions? Threw a lot on you right there.
Back to the queen. We still have not found her.
Okay?
But we have found the brood,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw the eggs.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any hints as to, I heard when you see, all the bees around something, look in that spot, she's usually, their dance going.
Sometimes they'll cover her, protect her.
But
Mm-hmm.
we've still never found one that she's in there.
And the evidence is the best indicator. But if you get a ball of bees on this frame and you think they may be covering her, just blow real gently on that ball. If you're not a smoker, you'll be fine. If you're a smoker, I wouldn't do that. But blow on that ball of bees and they'll disperse, they'll spread. I've not seen, typically you don't see them covering her like that. She's just in the mix of them and she's hard to see. If she's on the bottom, she'll dart to the other side. So, but as long as you're seeing eggs and fresh brood, I'm confident that you're probably okay.
And so if you see a live brood, would she be more likely to be in that area?
I think a lot of times she is. When I start seeing brood like that, that's when I really get tuned into looking for her.
Okay.
Yeah. That doesn't necessarily mean she is. If she's a young queen especially, she may lay on this frame today and move to another frame and move to another frame. She may start at the very outside and move. So her behaviors are not predictable is what I'm saying. But when I start seeing that light colored brood, I really get tuned into that frame to see if I can find her there. Yes, sir.
Can you go over, I know you went over it in the first class, but just real quickly, how to deal with if you do see queen cells and to prevent a swarm or to capture the swarm if they, you know, what to do about it, especially if you get a nuke that's so full right out of the gate.
Right.
You haven't even had a chance to become a beekeeper yet and you already have to deal with.
And you have to deal with them ready to swarm. Good question, and yes, we will. These are very, very, very handy to have. So don't throw your nuke box away, because if you get in a place where your hive, you break it open and you're starting to see queen cells, swarming process is in action. It's in gear. The motion has been set in order within that hive. So we're going to do one of two things. We can either allow them to swarm and hope that we catch the hive, in which you can use the nuke box to do that, or another hive body, depending on where they land. But the nuke box is a lot more manageable weight-wise versus a new hive. Or we can split that hive. How many remember us talking about splitting that hive? So if we come into our hive and we find queen cells, we've got to make sure that if we split the hive, we have to make sure that we either take all the frames with the queen cells, probably not over 5, depending on how strong this nuke is. You'll need to balance the halfway mark. So if you got 5 frames strong, you don't want to take all 5, obviously. I'd take a couple, maybe 3 at the most. But you've got to make sure that you get the queen cells out, or if you can find the queen, the frame with the queen on it, out. We got to separate the queen and the queen cells. Whichever way you choose to do it is your prerogative. Okay? But that mimics the swarm process taking place with the hive. So they feel like, especially if you take the queen, they feel like the swarming process is probably taking place.
So what if you have a frame that has a lot of the drone cells in it? Do you take that also, or do you just leave it?
You can do either way. I pay more attention to my queen cells. So the number of frames, if I've got 5 frames and they've already got in the swarming mode, I'm going to take 2 frames of that 5, maybe 3, but probably 2. And then if I've got more queen cells left on these other frames, I'm going to clean them off.
And how does a queen cell look different than, sure I can Google it and look it up. But.
Yeah, you can. And there'll be a peanut shape. It won't look anything like a brood cell. I've got my book I'll show you after class. But it's a peanut-shaped cell. A lot of times it'll be across the bottom or on the sides. Once in a while in the middle, but most of the time on the bottom. And it'll be like that long. It'll look totally different. It looks exactly like a peanut.
So if you put
texture-wise.
in another hive, then what do they do? Can you put the hive, does it have to be far away?
You need to move it. Mm-hmm. I'd move it a mile or 2 away just for about 3 weeks. That gives the new hive with the queen cells, whichever way you do it. If you leave the queen cells at your home, that gives them time for that queen to birth and her to take her maiden flight, be bred, and come back and start laying as a queen. It establishes the hive. Then you can bring the other hive back. Okay?
The hive we lost, that was on one of the frames. So I didn't know if that was what you were talking about.
That is a queen. Them are queen cells, aren't they?
Yeah. So
Don't they look like
that's-
queen cells? It's not a moth egg, right?
Oh, okay.
No, those are cells.
Okay,
that we
yeah,
found.
those are queen cells. It's hard
So
to tell.
that's what.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Any questions about splitting the hive? Now, some of you may get a nuke that's that strong. I mean, some of these nukes are unbelievably strong, especially depending on who your apiary is. But I've seen them come in that they were just loaded to bear, and those bees are ready to bust at the seams. And they had to be attended to in such a fashion of splitting them or getting them ready to prevent swarming.
Now, if you get a nuke that is that strong, could you not put a second brood box on?
Not if they have queen cells in them.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But if you eliminated the queen cells,
If they get in the swarming mode and they've already started queen cells, she'll lay more. It's hard to break that cycle. Now, the challenge with that, let's say you get a nuke like that. The challenge with that is the end result is going to be 2 hives that are moderately to relatively weak. So they're going to have to take extra care. You're going to have to feed them longer. You're going to have to watch over them a lot closer, because instead of having 7,000 or 10,000 bees in one hive, now you've broke down to 2 hives with half as many bees. Half as much brood, half as much food source as far as nectar and honey. So now you've almost got to nurse these bees along for a while until they get built back up. So it's almost, it's not what I would want to be an ideal situation, because now I become concerned about the strength of both hives instead of one. I had a strong hive, but if they've been in that box too long and they set the gears in motion for swarming, now I'm going to have to really, as a beekeeper, I'm going to have to really be careful to take care of them until they get their strength built back up.
How often does that happen?
There'll be 350 nukes at Nixa Hardware's next week. Probably 30 to 40 of them will be heavy, strong nukes. I mean, to that level. Yeah. Your queen is the key. If she's good genetics and she's a laying Jenny, she'll go to town. She'll really blow that box apart. I mean, if you get a real heavy nuke, you'll know you need to pay close attention. Yes, sir.
Where did you say the bees are going to be at? You say at that school down there.
Yeah, they'll be down Nicholas Road at that building.
Yep.
On the right-hand side, about a quarter of a mile down off the intersection. Any other questions? You have my phone number. If you get a nuke like that, please don't hesitate to call me. I'll be glad to help you walk through it, or if you need help with the transfer or the split, I'll be glad to help you do that as well, okay? All right, that answer your questions?
Yeah, it doesn't
Okay.
make me any less nervous.
Well, don't worry about it until you get there.
You can always, I mean, bees naturally swarm, so you could just let it be and see what
Mhm.
happens, right? And it's not a guaranteed thing that enough of them will leave your hive will not make it. It's just a gamble if you just let them swarm and the half that stays behind and you see what happens.
You can. That's the natural way to do it. Typically 40 to 60% of the bees will leave with the old queen. The other thing you can do, and this is really more an advanced technique, you can split them and let your virgin queen hatch, and then you can take her out of the equation and reintegrate the two hives. Especially if your mother queen is a go-getter like she obviously is for you to be in that point. So if you're worried about having two weak hives, you can let them go through that process, either swarming or splitting them, and splitting them is a more controlled avenue. If they swarm, you have no guarantees where they're going to land or when they're going to swarm. It's hard unless you want to put a cot out there and stay with them. But splitting the hive, you have a little more control of that scenario, and if you get them split and you allow that maiden or that virgin queen to hatch, then you can go in and pull her out of that hive and reintegrate the two hives back together. That way you've got your strong hive and they've went through the process. Now they have more room to grow and the swarming mode is over with, and more than likely they won't swarm. Any questions?
If we do split them, if we can't get that second hive a mile away, I mean, we have, how many acres? We have 16 acres, so I don't have the luxury of, and most of it's wooded, so I can't just put them in opposite corners because one would be way back in the woods and wouldn't do as well anyway. Can I just put them as far apart as I can on my property?
You can try.
Places,
you can try.
That doesn't sound very promising.
It's not promising. The closest that I've ever gotten away with it is a quarter of a mile.
Okay.
But if you've got a friend that you can just set it there for 3 weeks, just say 2 to 3 weeks, somewhere away, or if you need a place, holler at me. I've got some room at my bee yard. You can set it.
And then when you go to bring it back, do you just close it up and...
Go in the evening, close it up, strap it down, and move it.
Okay.
Leave it boxed up till morning.
Gotcha.
Okay. Where were we? Let's see. So we're examining hives. So I go through each frame like that. I'll take them out, and I'm moving gently, but I'm being deliberate, and I know exactly what I'm looking for. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm looking for all of those things that we talked about. My brood pattern, how old it is, how young it is. I'm watching for queen cells. I'm looking at my drone population, and I'm watching every bit of it that I can to see how this hive is doing and how it's faring and how it's progressing. I'd like to see how healthy my hive is. Okay? Any questions? Once I get through all 8 of the frames that are left, I had 8 frames out here. I picked one of them up. Once I get through all 8 of those frames, then I'm going to move them back to where I was originally, and I scoot them over, and it's kind of hard to scoot them because you got all that propolis going on, but just scoot them back over like they were as best you can.
Would it be advisable to actually mark the frames and then maybe put a dot for the front of them?
I have a lot of people that number them.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. They number them on the same end so they know the order in which it laid in the frame.
Right.
So, and then they've got the order of how they were succession unlaid. So there's not a thing wrong with that. If you want to numerically mark them, number them, and a lot of beekeepers, teachers will tell you that's a wise thing to do.
Are they ever attached on the bottom? I mean, like when you're
Sometimes they will be, but
because I know that's how they go.
yeah, sometimes they will be, but ideally I should have laid that like that to where I've just got 2 pressure points to where I've eliminated any damage to the rest of them, and then I stick these 2 back in. I want to pay attention when I'm putting these back in. I do it very gently and slowly. Sometimes those frames will be so filled out that it'll be hard to push them back together, but I want to pay attention to my sides. See how I've got extra space here and less here? I want to divide that out. For some reason, those outside frames, they will fill out more this way. Now I'm ready to go back. Again, if I want to mist them down, give them another drink of sugar water, I can. and then I put my lid back on. I'm moving gently, deliberately, and now I'm ready to put my lid back on.
Right there on the side.
My cattywampus lid. Questions?
So again, as you're inspecting it, at what point again, how many frames, at what point do we put another box on top?
Good question. So when I've inspected this frame, if I've got everything full except these two outside frames, I'm ready to put a new box on. If I have a lot of bees, I mean a massive amount of bees, and I still just have that many frames, 7 of them filled out, I may go ahead and move forward. Now, they will tell you not to jock around with the order of your frames. If this frame is empty and this frame is pretty full, I'm really bad about doing this number. What have I done?
Disrupted the order.
I've disrupted the order, but that's my honey store frames. So my damage is a lot less extensive, or it's really not a problem. But what I've done is I've forced them to go to that empty frame and fill it out. Because ideally, I want these outside 4 frames full of honey when I get to wintertime.
You missed them with the sugar water when you moved
Yep.
them like that.
Yep.
And they don't lay brood in the 2 outer ones, is that what you're saying? Or very seldom?
Most of the time, they will lay in the center. Once in a while, and I have seen this, you'll have a queen that'll start here and go this way or the other side. Then I don't change things. But if I've got just honey, if this frame is full of honey stores, which is what I want, then I may take and move that empty frame in one to just kind of push them to that frame to fill it out. But that's the only time that I will alter the succession of the frames. These in the middle, absolutely not, especially when I've got brood pattern in there. Now, if you're splitting a hive and you have to take these frames to make your new hive, that's one thing. Because you're taking the bees and the brood and everything that's on that frame. So then you replace that order, that frame right there, with a new frame. Mist it down and put it in. But as long as my hive is in working condition and I'm happy with the way they are, the only time that I will, and most beekeeper teachers will not tell you this, but the only time that I will alter the succession is on these outside 2 frames. If this absolute outside frame is not filled up and my one next to it is, then I may reverse them to push them to fill it out. And then I will still go up with my box.
But by doing that, though, you're forcing them to have more honey for winter feed.
Yep.
So you're actually doing the bees a favor.
Trying to, because if I don't, what I've seen oftentimes is this frame never gets filled up. Because if I put another box on, they're going to go right straight up. So I'm trying to balance the equation so that I have 4 frames of honey stores here instead of just 8.
So do you flip and then wait a week and then put the other box on to make sure that they are working, or do you just flip and put the box on?
I flip and put the box on because I've got a massive amount of bees. This is basically just honey stores. My brood is where my real concern is for swarming.
So if you spray, put the second box on and just spray your sugar water on all those panels, they'll automatically go up. You don't have to put one of those panels up there, or?
Oh no. Now, some people do that. Some people do a checkerboard. I never have. Some people will take 5 of these frames and move them up to the top. I don't do that. I just take my new box and mist them brown with sugar water. The worker bees will navigate up there. Before you know it, the queen's there too.
So what do you use? Like you're going to have a deep there. When you put your second, do you put another deep or medium? You use 2 deeps?
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you why I do that. Now, before I tell you why, let me say this to you. A lot of beekeepers will do that. Will do a medium, especially if they're an older beekeeper and weight's an issue, or a female beekeeper and weight's an issue. They'll use mediums, and I've seen hives with all mediums and no deeps, but I like to use 2 deeps, and the reason I do, it's a proven fact, with 2 deeps you'll have 7,000 to 8,000 more bee population in this hive. The other thing is, when I have 2 deeps, I've got not just 4 frames, but I've got 8 frames of hopefully honey stores, so my insurance for them going through the winter is a lot better. So instead of having a $50,000 life insurance policy, I think I've got a $500,000 life insurance policy. I'm feeling better about that.
Now, the queen, will she go up and lay into that second
She
box?
will.
She will?
Mm-hmm. And what you'll find is by the end of winter, they'll all be up in the second box. And, whoops, and the only thing left in the bottom box will be maybe a little bit of honey stores. So they'll be up in the top box. That's where they'll overwinter. That's where they'll feed, and that's one of the reasons that I'm more apt to leave a super on if I'm not happy with what I've got going on down here, because I know they're going to overwinter in this middle box, most likely. And so the food source is closer here, and I'm good with that.
Well, then come spring, do you reverse the box?
Yes.
Or do they go down?
No, they'll hardly ever go down. So when spring comes and everybody's up here in this second box and this bottom box is empty, what are we going to do? We're going to flip the boxes. We're going to put this one on the bottom because it's the fullest and move the empty one to the top.
Will there still be honey in that bottom one though?
We hope.
Now, when would you put your honey super on for your own honey?
So when I get my second box filled out, 7 to 8 frames, and I'm ready to go up with a honey super, I got to make sure I keep them having enough room. And if they're that strong, normally with a first year nuke, I don't take any honey. My policy is I want to make sure they're established and they survive the first year, especially through winter. Once in a while, you'll get a queen that's a laying Jenny. She's dynamite, and this box will explode. And these bees are great workers, and they'll fill up these 2 boxes. And it's July 15, and you need to put on another box. Then I put on a honey super. If
Want that all before September when the goldenrod starts?
Yeah.
Can they fill it up that quick?
Yeah, they can. If we get good weather and we get good moisture and nectar flow stays good, they can fill this up if they're that strong a hive. And if they're that strong a hive, I'm not opposed to robbing them. But if they're not that strong a hive and they've just got 2 or 3 of these frames filled out, then I'm probably going to leave that super on through the winter. Unless I want honey. If I want my own personal honey, I might take those 3 frames out and take this super off. But I need to make sure that I've got the honey stores here to get them through the winter, or I'm going to feed them brood patties or something like that through the winter.
Going back, when you're inspecting, what should we be seeing in terms of activity for hatching, that type of, for new bees? What should we be seeing? Can you tell when you've got new ones, the ones that have recently hatched? Are they visible?
Once in a while, you'll see that. Not real often, but once in a while, you can get lucky enough to see one hatching out.
Should you be seeing evidence, though, of hatching, and what does that look like? I mean, is it empty cells?
It'll be empty cells. Mm-hmm. So remember, we talked about the coloring of our brood. The lighter the color, the younger the brood. The darker the color, the older the brood. So when it gets a real dark brown, it's at that 21 day 21-day mark, and they're ready. It's close to that. They're ready to start hatching. I've never really had, in all the years I've been doing this, I've never got to see that hatching process take place. Maybe they do it at night, I don't know. But I've not been able to visibly sit there. I've watched a queen lay, and I saw that, and that was miraculous. But as far as watching a bee come through that brood cell, I've not got to see that. Yeah. You're more apt to see the egg in the cell than you are to see the larva hatch. Yes, sir.
Will they reuse those old brood
They will.
cells?
They will.
So like when we switch the boxes at the end or whatever, put the empty one on the top, say in the spring.
They'll reuse it.
We don't have to clean it out. We don't have to
No.
clean it as much. We just put it up there and they do the work.
They'll clean it better than you can. They're good housekeepers.
Like, how many supers, if you're just starting out, would you likely put on in 1 year? Like you're talking about, like you got these two, you put the first super on, you said you would leave it probably for them.
Depending on how many frames are in it, yep, and how much they've got down here.
Will you normally put more than one super on the first nucleus, or?
So my objective is to make sure that I don't let them get into swarming mode. So if I put this super on and my hive is really, really strong, and this is going to be an unlikely scenario for a nuke, but all things are possible. If they fill this top one out 8 frames out of my 9, what am I going to have to do? I got to go up. Either that or rob this one and give them a new super so they don't run out of room and place to go to work. So I've got to stay a step ahead of them in that regard to keep the swarming mode from kicking in gear. That answer your question? Okay.
So you said one time you only like to process your honey like once a year.
Mhm.
How do you store it? Like if you take the frames out and put them on one side so you can only do it once, you don't like to do it once, how do you store those?
So the first thing that I do, I usually will leave the super on until September. So if I fill this one out and I need to put a new super on, I will pull this one off, put the empty one on, and then this one back on top of the empty one. And just leave it on there till September. If I store it at home, if I take it off to take it home to store it, I will either need to put it in a trash bag inside my house somewhere where the temperatures are moderate, or I can put it in the freezer. And it'll be fine. Honey literally won't freeze, but
So technically it's possible you can just take out the panels, put them in your freezer and replace them with new ones, and you don't have to put a super on top. You can just keep replacing them.
yep, you can. And that's totally up to you what you do with them. I will tell you though, when you start taking these out, you want to handle them very carefully, because everywhere you punch a hole in that capping, it's called a capping on the honey, that honey's going to drain out. It'll be a mess. Remember, it's finger looking good up to the elbows. So however you choose to store it is totally your prerogative, but you will need to make sure that it's sealed up, because ants will find it, mice will find it, so you want to make sure that somehow it's protected. And even if you have it in a plastic bag and you have a mouse issue, like in a garage or something, they'll find it and they'll chew through that plastic. So you've got to protect it in some form. Okay?
Back to the after winter, and you inspect your brood boxes, and the bottom one is empty, but the middle one is like half. Would you go ahead and put the two together, or would you allow them to fill up the one that's about half full?
That's a really good question, and I thought about that a while ago. So if you get into spring and you've got the top brood box is where they typically will overwinter, and it's got some, but it's not completely full, and the bottom one is empty. The question was, do you put this on the bottom and let them fill it out before you put the other one back on top? And the answer is yes, you can. If you want to make sure that they fill out this box to its entirety, like you want, 8 frames or so, 7 to 8 frames, then yes, you can leave that empty box off until they get this box to where you want it to be. You're going to have to stay close to them to watch that, because when nectar flow hits, usually by March, your weather is a real key factor. So you're going to have to catch that warm day to get in to make sure you can assess that box properly to know when to put on your other box. But yes, good question. Yes?
How long would it take them to fill out a frame if you had a good year?
It depends on the strength of your hive, but I've seen them fill one of these out in a matter of 10 days. I mean, solid, strong hive. They can move fast if there's the forage is there, the weather is cooperating, and they've got the nectar flow. I've seen a good strong hive do these in 10 days. And I've seen them fill out the shallow in a week. I actually had them in an apple blossom or an apple orchard, and the whole orchard, of course, blossomed, and man, they went to town real fast. Yes, sir.
One quick question back to splitting the hive before swarm. I forgot to ask, you mentioned taking 2 to 3 frames. Which 2 to 3 frames?
I would take, if I'm taking my queen cells away,
Right.
then I would take the frames with the queen cells for sure.
Right.
And then if I have queen cells on the frames that I'm leaving behind, I have to clean them off.
If you only have queen cells on one frame.
So just take that frame and another one,
Oh, okay. It
whichever you
doesn't
want. No.
Gotcha.
I would like to have a
Frame, or
good,
does it need to
I would like to have a good balance of brood
Okay.
and honey, if I can, between the two boxes.
Gotcha.
Okay? Hey, let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and I'll answer questions for you.